one thing that I would like to say for the XRP ledger and the ESDR, I think you'll see currencies, but I think you're primarily going to see bonds and treasuries. And I think you're going to see them used just like regular currencies are in a, in a macro sense, like for billions of dollars. But I think the structure of how they structure that unit of value is a little bit different than how we would structure just the typical currency. So I think it'll be sort of like using treasuries like cash in a sense, but real-time cash. As of where now it's sort of like a series of IOU contracts that get fulfilled over a period of hours, if not days, depending on how much money it may be and depending on what day of the week it is. I think this is just going to allow them to basically be able to have a set standard to programmatically do all these different things that they already do. I think Ethereum's quite interesting because I think Ethereum has two huge things going for it that I think people don't talk about enough. I mean, obviously they talk about how it's one of the first blockchains outside of Bitcoin to make it into the space. But one thing they also don't talk about is how dynamic the Ethereum community is. And I think one of the biggest things that Ethereum is going to have over every other crypto is all of those business dynamic needs that essentially don't really fit into a box. The entire Ethereum ecosystem and the participants in that ecosystem are very, very, very willing to be flexible with different types of needs. And you see this from moving from Ethereum to Ethereum 2.0. The mere fact that you're able to get everybody to all come together and to all agree on a subset of rules and an update. And they've done this multiple times, but I think, and obviously, the multiple times they've done this weren't for the greatest of reasons, usually due to a crisis. But the fact that they're able to get up and be mobile and be able to change on a dime, I think Ethereum as a whole is going to be able to do so many different things. And I think as a whole, from all the smart contract platforms, it'll probably have the most like dynamic or the most fluid level of being able to conform to different markets. But I don't think it's going to be structured in the same way that everybody structures payments, because everybody looks at all the cryptocurrencies like they're all going to be payment tokens, and I don't think that's going to be the case. I think a lot of the native tokens on their blockchains will be payment tokens for their blockchains, but for the overall ecosystem and the overall payment and banking sector, I think there will generally be a handful of like settlement tokens, and then Ethereum would have its ecosystem where you pay gas and you pay Ethereum to do all the different features and all the different things that you may want to get into. Now, for Ethereum as a whole, I think some of the interesting applications that can end up being built off of Ethereum, especially the ERC tokens, and especially being able to use the broader Ethereum ecosystem on top of the Ethereum virtual machine. I think it also has a robust economy of developers that are constantly finding business needs. And you see this with like VeChain, and you see this with like just so many of the other ERC tokens. And that's the thing. I guess the one thing that's sort of like off about that is, since anybody could really make an ERC token, there are just so many of them, and a lot of them are kind of just there for the sake of being there. But there are like a lot of interesting projects that are definitely going to make quite an impact. And I think Ethereum is one of the most dynamic blockchains when it comes to being able to change for business needs. Artificial intelligence and machine learning requires big data in order to really get any sort of result out of it, or at least to get a result in a timely manner. So with blockchain, you're constantly, all these blockchains are generating so much data all the time. So what does that mean as a whole when it comes to machine learning? Well, that means all of the different applications that you could think of that can run some form of analysis on those blockchains can use machine learning to essentially manage and process all of that data that's being produced on that blockchain, and potentially process that data in real time, because it's an ongoing process. And it's so much data that it'd be perfect for the type of setting that machine learning may have. But you can take any sort of feature or any sort of application that you would like to build and be able to interoperate machine learning involved, due to the fact that you have such a wide scale of data. Even if it was something simple, like let's say you wanted to create an auditing application, and all it did was every single time a series of addresses that were meant to be audited got triggered or something, some function would run. Well, what if you just added a machine learning layer on top of that? Would not only take all the incoming data and evaluate that, but take all of that data and maybe even compare it with some other a silo data you may have for like fraud detection, or for maybe you want to do a comparison analysis between two clients and you want to make sure you're able to process a huge chunk of data almost even in real time, with like I said, with something like machine learning that could do something like to that degree. I don't know if that's a good example or not, but it's the big data portion of blockchain that really gives machine learning its legs for something like that. It's sort of like that slippery slope of, I guess you could say, CBDCs and the adoption of distributed ledger technologies is sort of that same slippery slope of like how like the Patriot Act was for like trying to find like terrorism and trying to like really like go into like managing technology and managing data on a larger scale. And I think it's kind of like that 2.0, but the technology is better, it's faster, and it's woven into the economy, or it will be woven into the economy. So everything is real time, everything is instant, and everything's fast. I think that's the big thing, because everything else in technology has sped up and gotten better and better, while a lot of financial technology and a lot of just really, I guess you could say, I don't want to say cloud technology, but there's definitely been this crazy progression from this old traditional architecture of self-hosting, and there's sort of this weird mixture between like traditional architecture, cloud architecture, and blockchain. And things scale significantly faster in cloud and blockchain. So you're seeing this weird migration coming into play. But with all that said and done, I do think you're gonna have just everything's gonna be integrated with everything else. And I do think you're gonna have a whole nother level of public to be involved. So sort of the way we look at public now is like if you go out in public to like the public square to the park, you're like in public. I think there's also going to be considered a digital public, sort of like how if you go on Twitter or something or social media, it's the digital public. But I think there's going to be more of a meta layer to that, where part of the digital public could be that you were at the Times Square and it's on the blockchain that could be auditable, type of, like, not exactly to that degree, but it almost redefines what digital public is outside of just you posting for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, could we potentially have it on the blockchain? However many times people left and came into the country, and it's you know what I mean? Like it's an auditing tool of which you're able to, and don't get me wrong, like you could, check those IDs with, if they're on any sort of list or if they've got any, whatever, warrants, whatever it may be. But it's one of those things too, where it's like at what point do we question what's not being tracked? Because it seems as if everything is being tracked. And what's that relationship between public data and private data? Because I think that honestly may be not really a crisis, but it's going to be like a panicky sort of thing where people are going to go, wait a second, I don't want this out there. And I think it's going to spark a real conversation of what private and public data is going to look like. But a lot of the like images floating around over like the new financial system, or a lot of the stuff that people are sharing is a lot of nonsense. And it's kind of funny because they think it's hilarious. And like one of the documents I was saying that's supposed to be like a new financial document, he said that like he like found the person on Twitter that made it, and they like made it as like almost like a guess in the dark of what they think the financial system would be, and it kind of just ran like wildfire. So it's kind of like this, like I will say this. I think there are a lot of trolls out there, especially with a lot of the claim to be riddlers. But I will say I do believe that there is insider trading happening flat out in the open through a series of codes. But I don't think it's like, moon overnight type stuff. I think it's flat out insider trading. And there's so much nonsense around it to where it's like the perfect play. Like if people are thinking there's some grand conspiracy with secret codes all over the place, and you're trying to basically go, oh yeah, the price of this is going to go to this point, and send it to your friend, or not even send it, but just have it like posted out there in the public. It's kind of like the perfect play. And the only reason I say that is I've gone through some of the Mr. Pool like hashes, and I've gone through it's kind of like down the rabbit hole with some of the people's research on top of some of the stuff that the Zinfin ambassador told me. And it seems like there's something to be there. But like I said, it has really nothing to do with like overnight, or it really seems like price. And you can call that whatever you will, but it sounds like flat out insider trading, but someone's trying to be real clever about it. There's a fundamental flaw in the proof of work system for how they're mining the Bitcoin in the first place. So you need to remember every single time the block is a block is formed, only the miner that was able to crack the hash is able to get the block. And there's some other incentives around fees and such, so where other miners can get the fees. But it really comes down to who has the biggest computational unit. So if you're not competitive, and I mean by competitive, I mean if you're not in the top 1% of computational power on the network, you will never like mine a single Bitcoin. And I guess you could say you're supporting the network because I mean, I wouldn't say you wouldn't mine a single Bitcoin. You could potentially mine something, because there's no impossibility. It's just the probability of being able to mine some gets less and less the more processing power that's allocated to another mining pool. But yeah, the biggest problem is primarily the scaling. But the biggest thing that a lot of Bitcoin people don't really want to talk about is, although you want to talk about having layer 2 solutions to help with off-chain payments or faster payments, that fundamental flaw of, let's say we had 10 nodes operating and the one node or the last 3 nodes are the biggest nodes on the network. They're huge, giant mining pools. So they mine all the Bitcoin all the time. So all these nodes are operating all the time, but it's the last 3 nodes that are getting the reward for all the energy going into the network. Well, that means the last 7 nodes are wasting their energy no matter what layer 2 solution you put on top of there. You see what I mean? It's almost like somebody saying like, oh yeah, I understand we have, you know, this big old truck that has like 4 miles to the gallon, right? But then they say, oh, but what if we just like eco boosted or something? Or what if we made it into a hybrid? And it's like, yeah, there's no amount of hybrid you're going to put on a 4 miles to the gallon truck that's going to make it like comparable to like a Prius, you know? Maybe you might be able to, improve it. Like I said, you might be able to get it to like 10 miles a gallon or, 11 or something, but it's the same deal with Bitcoin. You can make it a little bit better, but that fundamental flaw is not going to make it competitive. That's where this another thing that comes into with people trying to claim this green energy stuff with Bitcoin and proof of work. It literally makes no sense. It literally makes no sense. I guarantee you, make a Bitcoin node and have it run off of green energy. I challenge anybody to go do that. And people may go, oh, the freaking volcano and wherever that was, or they may go, oh, this instance here. And you can't go for isolated incidents. It has to be scalable. If you want to say it operates off green energy, then anybody's got to be able to do it. If you're going to claim it's as decentralized as you want. Otherwise, it's going to be a more and more centralized network with a bunch of other people that are just sitting on the network, losing money, not really doing anything. And like I said, I think there's going to be a wall with this because, like I said, the scaling problem is an exponential problem, and there's no ceiling for it. So it's just going to keep getting more and more expensive, keep becoming more and more energy intensive, and it's the main reason why you can't mine Bitcoin or you can't mine or be competitive in mining Bitcoin on your laptop anymore than you would have in 2009 or 2010. And that's the thing. Okay, then scale that up now. If you could mine Bitcoin on your laptop in 2009 and now it requires a supercomputer, then what's it going to take in 2029? Like, for the average person that's like sort of like listening to this or doesn't really like understand like the scaling problem, just think about it. If you can mine it on a laptop a couple of years ago, and then now it takes giant server farms to be even competitive, like where does this go? It just keeps on going, and it gets more and more energy intensive. It gets more and more, and there's no amount of green energy. There's barely enough regular energy to try to manage these processes, and it becomes this weird. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if it's like something in the media or if people just don't want to talk about it, but a lot of it just doesn't come. It doesn't scale at all. It hasn't been able to scale, and the thing, if it has, it wouldn't have these problems now. It would be at the same level of functionality as it was in 2009, which was actually considerably really cheap to send Bitcoin because of how small the network was. So, and it didn't have the same delays or the same congestion that it has now. But yeah, there's serious problems to be had with proof of work, and that energy scaling problem is the number one. And I don't know why people make excuses for it or try to like say the green energy thing. It makes no sense. The green energy, it makes literally no sense. Like Can someone tell me how much power Bitcoin uses in the average day? And can someone tell me how much power all of the green energy in the world produces in a single day? And please compare the two. And I will tell you, it'd probably look ridiculous. It'd probably look like, oh, according to the Bitcoin people, like 1/3 or 1/2 of all the, I'm telling you, it'd be something like that. It'd be something ridiculous to where it would be almost all the green energy is running the Bitcoin network if Bitcoin's running off green energy.